I'm Vinay. As as you can see here, I'll have a brief summary on what we do. The topic today is Talent Alchemist. This is a HR conference, so I think very relevant. We are into technology skilling. What we represent is we are part of the Manipal group. A lot of you are aware of the university system that we have, the medical institutes that we have, but we are an entity which actually works with the enterprises and helps them in their talent transformation. Provide end-to-end solutions for learning, both on the technical side and on the professional side. This is certain domains, certain areas that we offer across technology, leadership, different business domains through our platforms. This is what we offer. What I'm going to showcase today is some of the data points of what we have seen to be working, what we have seen as insights, right, over the almost a decade that we have been into this transformational journey. Now, across the employee life cycle, so this is what you touch upon. So you have the gorilla force, the young, energetic pre-joiners to freshers, to all the way to mid-level professionals to your senior executives, right? So you have programs, you have products, which actually map to a particular need, and we provide the solution all the way from you want to do an early engagement to a on-demand pool to somebody who wants to do a rapid skilling, provide a sandbox environment for them to do hands-on, provide content, provide the necessary upskilling, and finally, all the way up to senior executives in terms of leadership development. Now, in this whole, today we are in this era of digital AI, generative AI. We all agree that there are two sides. There are two kind of core competencies, right? You're talking about the mindset and the skill set. Does everybody agree here? Correct? Yeah? I mean, we've heard this enough number of times, but I just want to reinforce the fact that industry is not just looking for you to write a code, but does it actually solve a customer problem, right? Ultimately, it is not how sophisticated or what a wow, algorithm that I have written, but does it align to business goals, right? Are you truly, are you really understanding where it is applied? Do you have the big picture in mind, right? So that has to do less with technology, but more with the mindset, right? It is the holistic approach. It is not just the approach, but also the passion to make a difference, right? So that is a mindset. Now, how do we hire? In this entire scenario, when AI, you say that generative AI makes it easier, AI will not replace you, those with AI skills will. Have you heard of this, right? So we know that AI skill is mandatory. Again, AI skill is a skill which a human has to learn. But then typically in the technology space, if you see, across all programming constructs, be it code generation, refactoring, with generative AI, your time taken productivity is at least 50% of the time you save by doing most of these tasks, which means I have 50% of the time left because a lot of this mundane stuff our AI can take up. So when that happens, I still need to get skilled to use these tools though, right? The tool is not going to work by itself. What then happens is I have this new mantra, AI-assisted skill set, but then the mindset now becomes non-negotiable, right? Because you really are more functional in your nature. You have to be functional in terms of knowing where to apply what, right? Now, that being the case, one of the solutions that we have had is how do you really find the right talent? This is all of you are HR leaders here, part of the HR fraternity. One of the important things is to build a talent pipeline, right? Now, most of the times, what do we do for talent pipeline? Is it a standard assessment? You do a verbal assessment, or you go and you do a hacker rank kind of an assessment and find out success rate is 10% is very high. I know out of every 100, most of the times, if your assessment, if you have a good qualifying criteria, it's not even more than 2 to 3%, right? Now, what we have done is, instead of traditional, given the need for talent, the type of talent that you're looking is different, we're talking about open book. you're talking about guided way of assessing. When you say guided way of assessing, what are you really assessing? You're assessing learnability. You're assessing problem solving. You're assessing interest. Because remember, anyway I have to learn the skill. Today there is GitHub Copilot. Tomorrow there is Amazon Code Whisper. I have to anyway learn the tool. So given that I have to learn the tool, I have to keep retraining my workforce to some extent or the other. More important is to test for this. And how do we test for this? We did a kind of a POC where a standard assessment where you have 1,500 people who gave the assessment. 120 were the actual selected candidates. Scheduled 100 plus interviews first round. Another 32 got for the second round, and finally you had 12 joiners. Does this sound familiar to most folks? Hello? Right? Very, very familiar. Now, so we had to somehow do a better way of, so we brainstormed to say is there a better way of doing the same thing? Ultimately, you're actually looking for, many of the folks who dropped in from 1,500 to 120, are you really sure that if they could not clear a HackerRank assessment, they're not good right now? Because we're anyway going to train them for skills. So what we did was, we selected the candidates and gave them a project. When you say guided project, close to around 12 to 15 hours of mentoring, 1 or 2 hours every day, not spoon feed, but give them a lot of resources around. And then you look for who is the person, who are those who are taking one step ahead to actually stretch themselves and really get involved in solving the problem. Now what happens is out of 90, the first day, people sign up. Initially when you have, there's a euphoria, everybody signs up. The second day, it was a complete drop. From 90, it came down to something like a 40, 50. And by the time we finished the 4 to 5 days, every day of 2 to 3 hours, you had only people who actually completed were 20, out of which we asked them to complete a project based on what mentoring that they'd done. Only 16 of them showed up, and finally 10. So look at the number of interviews we did. We had to only do 16 interviews, and then we have 6 still in the pipeline. So there are models like these which you can gauge, and we've successfully implemented this across banks, BFSI. One of the challenges that BFSI sector has is nobody really knows them. They're deep tech companies right now, right? So people go up to the IT folks, IT kind of roles in IT companies, but BFSI is booming too. So, this was one of the pilot projects that we did, very, very successful in terms of really building the talent pipeline, yeah? Anybody knows who this is? Yeah? Javgal Srinath? Yeah? Now, what we're trying to say is mastering a skill. Now, I get the right talent, but mastering a skill, the way a machine learns, right? You feed a lot of data. We've heard about that. There are frameworks, models. We've heard of GANs, ANN, CNN, RNN, the whole of generative AI frameworks. You need to have the right hardware. Then you need a community to really have the right talent. And that's how machine learns. I was attending a conference with Javgal Srinath a few months back. And, this is what he said. He said, you can give me a lot of data. You can give me a lot of analysis, where to bowl, how to bowl. I can look at all that, all the direction that you're giving me. But you still have to make my body to do what you want it to do. Hello? Right? It's a very complicated process because in your brain, the motor skills need to understand and translate to body motions. Now, that takes time. It does not happen like a machine can keep learning, right? But here, I can keep learning, but it's not translating to action. Knowledge is there, but knowledge is not getting translated to skill, right? In fact, he said that many times we see cricketers who are out of form, and one of the reasons that they're out of form is they've learned a new weapon in terms of how they bowl, maybe straightening the bowl, outswinger from an in-swinger, they've learned that, but they're not yet comfortable. Why? Because there's no logic to it. It's time, it's patience, it's sacrifice. Now, those are the foundational concepts of learning which we cannot ignore that, right? Those are on which you will actually build any type of learning. So what we're saying is function of time with body is different. So when we look at in this new era, there is very easy to find tools, but the foundation of how a human being learns, always remains relevant with the very basics, right? So we're talking about you learn and you implement versus you learn, you test. You learn, you implement. You learn, you implement. You test. I can go on for a 16 hours of of a session, 16 hours of lot of data, I can learn, of lot of knowledge I can learn, versus I have 2 weeks, every day 1.5 hours, right? 2 weeks is 10 days, close to the same, 15 hours. Which do you think is better? Right, the second one. Why? Because a machine can learn those 16 hours, but I need a lot of time to reflect, to learn, to reflect. That's how our brains, that's how we are wired, right? Now, this is a data point of how somebody from a level 1, when you say level 1, it's a tier 1 colleges. And level 2 is level 3 are the tier 2, tier 3 colleges. See, when they get started, you see 72% to 45%, but when they are finished or they're mid of their training, there is a 72 to 77, 45 to 62, there is an improvement, right? Finally, there is 72 to 81, 45 to 55, there is a significant improvement. But what happens is the way a tier 1 learner, the way he or she responds to way a tier 2 response is very, very different. Now, hallucination, we've all heard of hallucination, right? The way a tier 1 kid, look at the curve, it just goes up, and they're very curious, they just don't want to sit in a session, they want to go out, perform, do a lot of hands-on, whereas somebody who's a different type of a learner, a different type of a background, for them, they say that, like in a hill, if I have to climb up the hill, the very first thing I have to do in order to climb up is to go down, right? Right? So you don't go down, you're climbing. The word is climbing, but you're going down. Now, why this is very significant in this new age and era? Because we have seen, because of high business demands, you have to have first day, first star, productivity. The kid has just come there, and if you try to beat the performance out of them, it just doesn't work. Whatever, they just freeze. There is absolutely no output, and it's not a win-win for anybody else, right? But what happens in this whole age, ultimately they reach the same point, but the methods, right? The means to do that and the methods to do that might be different, but the end goal is just the same. What is that method? That method is nothing but engagement, a lot of engagement, which means we have to take time off ourselves to really, nurture them, to really take them through. I know my time is up, but this is a solution design, right? Engagement, presentation, come out, experience, do knowledge checks, do gamification in terms of recognizing people, in terms of social learning, in terms of performance recognition, and most important is fun activities, right? When you say fun activities, we're talking about a lot of chart presentation. Now, this is easier said than done because somebody has to think through it as to what will fit whom, right? Speak to them in their language, speak to them in their words, and actually bring in the transformation. Because technology is less about tech or true logic, it's more about emotion, right? When you say emotion, it is the true energy in motion. That's very, very important, right? To get the best out of people. Now, I'm almost done here. This is about, now again, function of, time with body is different. We say with our mind is different because it takes time. This is a scenario for self-paced learning. Now, what is the completion of usual self-paced learning that we administer to all our learners, whether it is fresh cohort or mid-level? What do you think is the completion, industry average of completion? It's less than 2 digits. Do we all agree? Do we all agree that if you have a self-paced module, completion, you have to do a whole lot of nudging, all kind of, gamification, different song and dance show that we do to really get them up to even a respectable 40-50% of completion. Now, what we have seen is, instead of just having people complete, this is completion of your modules, okay? Purely self-paced, right? You give them to do activity. Whether you complete or not, we don't care. You do a case study, right? You do some projects. And as a consequence of doing the project, you're going back and learning, which means there are people who have done 80% of the progress, right? They've only done 73%. 73% of the people have done 80% progress, but what they did in terms of case studies, 98%. Very less progress, but I've solved the problem. So problem solving, ensuring that you give the right relevant content becomes very important. And finally is, we've had a lot of people go through role-based training programs, upskill programs. Many times, within the third or the fourth week, if your attendance is 100% out of 25, let's say there are 22, 23, by the time you hit the first week or the second week, it just drops down to less than 50%. Is that a problem which is common everywhere? Yeah? Now, one of the ways of really nurturing what we have seen works the best is reviews. And every AI model works on recommendation, on reinforcement. Reinforcement has a reward and a penalty. An agent in AI has a reward and a penalty. Now, very important is to have those rewards and recognition. When my folks is when a person of somebody in my team is going through an upskill program, am I taking time off to understand what he's gone through, and am I giving enough freedom to understand where he's applying, giving him or her enough opportunities to apply them in their current project and actually recognize. So we have a formal session where the manager comes and says, you know what, I'm so proud of you. The very first proud of you itself raises a lot of, the good hormones in you, right? And it brings in that positivity. I could observe your knowledge with respect to the system, right? I see an improvement in the approach. You start applying everything right now. Yesterday, what you did, I'm sure you learned it from there. So when you do a formal mechanism of bringing in the participant and their manager, and they actually acknowledge what they see in their day-to-day work, it goes a long way. Now, these are small, minor interventions that you do, very small, but it's like the rudder of the ship, can change the direction of the whole ship, right? But interventions like these has really helped us to really up the curve, bring in more engagement, bring in more excitement and enthusiasm, and make it more of a pull rather than a push. And lastly, I know my time is up. This is how people learn. We say you learn 25% from the guru, 25% on your own, 25% of your class from your classmates, but balance you learn with the passage of time. Now that is where culture of an organization becomes so important, right? We all for one and one for all as a united effort. If we have that culture, if we have acceptance of people, setting at the same time having good benchmark where people actually stand as testimonials, right? People are practicing what they are preaching in terms of learning. It goes a long way in elevating everybody's knowledge level, right? So with that, I'm done. This is our email ID. We're from UNext. If you have any questions or anything that we can serve your organization, we'll be more than happy to connect with you. Thank you so much, and back to us.